delay. We were getting tuned up in preparation for this illustrious and very productive meeting. I guess with that, we'll have a call to order. Mr. Attorney?
Marty, would you like to do a roll call, please?
Mr. Ford? Here. Mr. Ferre? Here. Ms. Gutierrez? Mr. Meyer? Mr. Vasquez? Here. Mr. Walters? Ms. Weinberg? He's on the phone. Secretary Wolf?
Here.
Treasurer Rodriguez-Pina? Vice Chair Smith-Fano? Chair Martinez? You're right. Sir.
Okay. Hold on a second.
I didn't hear my name, but for the record, I am here, Ms. Weinberg.
Oh, welcome, Ms. Weinberg, and then Mr. Walters is walking in for the record. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. All right. I guess any public comments at this point? Anybody from the audience who's care to speak? Seeing no hands raised, then we'll move on to our attorney.
Yeah, before we move over to the action items, I'd like to ask all the members of this committee having any conflicts with any items on the agenda. Do any members of?
No conflict.
Okay, we'll move forward.
All right.
Action item A, approval of summary minutes, Budget and Finance Committee meeting on November 30th, 2016.
Okay. I think you all have the minutes with you. I don't know if anybody has any comments or additions or deletions that you care to make. If not, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the minutes. Motion to move, and second by Mr. Myers. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Minutes approved.
Item B, approval of Treasurer's Report.
All right. I think what we're going to do here is turn it over to our CFO here, Marie Schaefer, and let her go over the highlights. I think that you'll have some questions afterwards, but with that, Ms. Schaefer.
Mr. Rodriguez-Pina. The Treasurer's Report has two parts today. At the last meeting, there was a request on how we're going to make up the deficit from the hurricane impact, and I just handed out the supplemental to the Treasurer's Report, and I apologize. It should have went in the package. So I do apologize for that. And if there's questions after the meeting or before the board meeting, I'd be more than happy to discuss that at the board meeting as well as individually with the board members. For the 6th month of December, we show overall revenue at $4.1 million below what the forecast is. I want to bring your attention to December's revenue was 19.3 compared to 19.7. One of the things that I'd like to discuss is the processing of our toll-by-plate images. As you know, on a revenue base, 80% of our revenue that comes out of the lane is from SunPass, and we recognize that revenue immediately once we realize that we have a good transaction. On the toll-by-plate customers, it goes through a process that when a car goes through the gantry and we don't get a read, it becomes a toll-by-plate image base at that point in time. It goes through a process being image-based. We have to find the customers and we bill it. So we don't recognize that revenue until it is billed. Back in May, we went through a process of a software conversion from our current provider to another provider, and it has taken them a little bit of longer than we anticipated, so there's a lag in the image review, so there is a backlog. So the variance that you see for the month of December is really due to the backlog of images that they have yet to bill customers. Unfortunately, Steve Andriuk, who's toll director, is not here today to discuss that. But in speaking with him, we do feel that the backlog should be caught up by the fiscal year, the end of the fiscal year. But I did want to make the board aware of that. That was one of the challenges in operations. So we do feel that the overall forecast for the fiscal year 17 will be made whole with the exception of the hurricane. The hurricane was a little bit overall, a couple of $1 million. We do think that we would make up some of that, but not the entire amount for the hurricane loss. On the expense side, we still trend towards the budget, the forecast through the 6-month period. So overall, we're posting net revenues at $52 million for the 6-month overall. The supplemental that I handed out shows a couple of columns. It shows the approved budget of forecast revenue of $240 million, expenses of $59.8 million, and then net revenue is $180, and the senior debt coverage is 187. So that really is the target. Based upon the projected actual, the revenue would be a little bit lower than what we anticipated when we put the budget together, about $1.8 million. And on the expense side, about 1.4 of a savings. And let me discuss a little bit about the expense side. When we put the budget together, Mr. Rodriguez-Pina had asked us that he did not want an increase from fiscal 16 to 17. So the approved budget for 17 was pretty much flat from the previous year's budget. So there's really not a lot of cushion or fluff, so to speak, in the budget. 16 results are flat to 2017's budget that was approved. But the areas that we see that we have an opportunity for savings is the toll operations, which I just discussed. Because we haven't sent the bills out the first couple of months of the fiscal year, we didn't have to pay the vendor. So there is a lag in the billings, but at the same time, we did not have to pay the vendor for not sending out those bills. So that's about $1.1 million of a savings in toll operations that's going to help our bottom line. And we also did the refunding of 2006, and because we did the refunding, there's certain costs that were absorbed through the refunding cost of issuance. One of them was the financial advisory services that came out of the cost of issuance, and there was bond expense that we pay the rating agencies for annual surveillance because they did a ratings for the 2016. That's another savings that we didn't have to occur. And then we do have some headquarters administration costs that we saw, such as training, conferences, some other little items, about $100,000. And then we do have a contingency reserve. We feel about $100,000 will not be utilized. So overall, it's safe to say that there is a guaranteed $1.4 million of savings from the budget. So with the savings of $1.4 million for fiscal 17 and looking at the debt service reserve, we did the refunding. We have about $1 million savings on our debt service reserve. We had $96.4 million that was approved back in April. The actual for debt service with the refunding incorporated into it is $94.5 million. So overall, even though we had the hurricane, our senior coverage ratio is actually going to be above what was approved, so 1.89. I also included a break-even analysis to show where revenue could go, $3.9 million of a variance and still have the savings of 1.4. The debt service would still be 95, and we would get back to the 1.87. So if things did deteriorate for any reason, we still have enough of a opportunity to still make it up to 1.87 coverage.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Schaefer. At this point, I guess I'm going to open it up. Mr. Director, do you want to make any comments in addition to this point? All right. Open up to my fellow board members and any questions they may have, and please ask questions and make sure to get them answered. Anybody has any questions? All right. Mr. Board, and then Chairman Martinez.
Marie, you stated that the variance on revenues was a result of the lag of billings on the toll-by-plate.
The variance, obviously, at this point in time was impacted based upon the hurricane that we had in October. And the other factor that is factoring in for the 6-month period is indeed the lag from the toll-by-plate customers. From my understanding with toll operations discussion, that lag should not continue. They should be caught up towards the end of the fiscal year. They're starting to catch up now in the month of January. Once they do the image review and bill the customer, we're able to recognize the revenue.
How many months of lag do you have now?
I think it's a couple of weeks, maybe it's 6 weeks, somewhere in that realm.
A 6-week time frame.
So if I look at the revenues for the month, which are $20 million, and you look at 20% of that, which is a toll by plate, which would be about $4 million. So if the variance is 1.7, you've got almost half of the revenue for the month in a lag environment. Is that a correct evaluation?
No.
But let's go back again. 20% of the revenues are toll by plate, right?
Correct.
And the revenues for the month were 40. So about 20% of 20% of 20 would be $4 million.
$4 million, right.
But your lag is 1.7 million.
We do incorporate. Let's go through the math. When revenue comes out of the lane, it's usually more a 60-40 split because of the fact that it's got to go through an image review. Of that 40, we find out 20% of that is a toll-by-plate customer, is a SunPass customer. So 40% that comes out of the lane, half of that is SunPass. The remaining is toll-by-plate. And remember, toll-by-plate is twice the SunPass rate. What I've incorporated for the 6-month period, I've incorporated 2 accruals. I incorporated a $3 million accrual, more or less, for toll-by-plate, and an additional $4 million accrual for iTolls, which are customers that we know that are SunPass customers that we haven't sent to SunPass yet because it has to go through an image review. So in the revenue base, there's about $70 million of an accrual. That's on a gross basis. Incorporated into the variance is allowance for doubtful accounts for the toll-by-plate, because I have to continue to say that there's a percentage of customers that are not going to pay us in this fiscal year.
That's one of the cases where be careful. If you ask a question, you might get a proper response.
So
what I'm trying to determine, Marie, is the following. When you first read this, you develop a sense that we're going to miss the revenue number, the top line number. And you guys are arguing that we're not going to miss the top line number because right now the shortfall is a product of a lag, of a float in billings.
no, sir. I believe that we will have a shortfall in the revenue by $3.5 million is where I think.
Excluding the one-time event.
Yes, that is correct.
So are we going to have a shortfall in revenue excluding the one-time event? Excluding the hurricane revenue, miss?
We will make up the variance for the backlog, but I do not think that we're going to make up the variance for the hurricane.
Event. Right.
We are going to have a shortfall.
We will have a shortfall.
Great.
Yes.
So first of all, congratulations on finding the revenues to meet the goals that we set back in December. That's great. But it seems like we will have a further task ahead of us, correct?
Well, just want to make sure that we're clear. What we see on traffic is that excluding the month of October, traffic is trending 1% above the forecast. So that we didn't cause that, but that is a benefit to us. We also incorporated allowance for doubtful accounts, which I think I took a conservative approach to offset toll-by-plate customers. You never know until we ended up closing the books what that number is going to look like. I also have incorporated $2 million, about $480,000 a month, more or less, for the cashback program. That could change at any point in time, and the governing board said, we ain't going to do it. But that's an additional $2 million that is also an offset to our revenue base. So I think there's opportunity to make up that money should this governing board want to say, we're not going to do the cashback. Let's take a look at the allowance for doubtful accounts. I think revenue will continue, traffic will continue to be about 1%.
I'll take this offline with you.
Okay.
Okay. Chairman Martinez.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Marie, I want to clarify something. You indicate here that our budget for operating decreased by 5% between 2017 and 2016, correct? Yes. Could you indicate to me what percentage of our revenues are dedicated to administrative and operating costs for MDX directly?
It's less than 20%
It's less than 20%?
for operating and maintenance, yes.
As far as for staff, what percentage do we spend on, for example, for salaries, et cetera? What percentage of the 42 employees we have here, what
A
percentage?
little bit under 6%, including benefits.
Okay.
Any further questions from our board? Okay, I have a couple of questions, Marie. So I guess from a policy, and this is not directed specifically to you, it's more to my board members, from a policy perspective, something that we need to monitor is this whole cash back.
Yes, sir.
Policy making, that's a policy decision. That's not a financial decision. That's a decision that needs to be considered, undertaken, and given great thought to by this board and the subsequent board members. So I think I wanted to put that for the record. I think that we need to give some thought in anticipation of that. Probably the Public Relations and Governmental Affairs Committee need to look at that as well. And I think there's some challenges there that we need to consider. So I just wanted to put that on the record that I think we're maybe at a crossroads given the policy that we have in place and the commitments that we made, and it was all contingent on having a surplus. And we're projecting now that we will not have a surplus, and then that's going to impact that decision. And then people may not be getting their Christmas checks or holiday checks, to be more generic. So I think that's something, again, that needs to be considered. I'm sure Mr. Rodriguez, along with Chairman Martinez, will have to give that some thought in preparation. What can we be done? Before you say something, Mr. Rodriguez, I think part of the consideration that this board also needs to give some thought to is the debt coverage ratio. I mean, I know that we're above what is recommended. If I'm not mistaken, we're at 1.7. We said we'd be at 1.84. Is that correct? Or am I off by a number or two? The debt coverage?
The debt coverage is 1.87 that was budgeted, and I think we're trending towards 1.89.
1.89. So I think something for us to consider. I know that's again a touchy subject. What are the consequences or the savings of keeping it at 1.7 and then not 1.89? Those are some of the things that we want to look at because, again, it's going to impact. I don't know that our rating agencies will look at us differently if we change it from a 1.89 to a 1.87 and then determine what is the consequence of that. And it may be insignificant, but again, from a policy-making decision, I think that's something that we need to consider. Going back to the lag that you have, you said it's about 6 weeks behind. Convert that into dollars for me. So in 6 weeks, once you get caught up, what would that look like? What would that dollar amount? And then is there a collection fee? And what is a net for us?
What I accrued because of the lag for the Sun Pass and the toll by plate is about $7 million.
Okay.
So that $7 million is incorporated into the $234 million.
Correct. And the reason that we include SunPass, like Marie said, is the iTolls, the image tolls. Okay. Many people who have SunPass don't mount it correctly. It doesn't read correctly. And, once we take the image and we determine that they're a SunPass customer, we image toll them. So we put that as an allowance as well.
Okay. Thank you. What I heard you say also is that we are, in essence, deferring from this fiscal year to next fiscal year, paying some vendors. Is that accurate?
No, sir. The $1.1 million in toll operations is due to the fact that the billings did not occur in July and August. So they're paid based upon the bills that they send out. Because they weren't sent out, there was a lower volume of it, there was a savings of $1.1 million.
Okay. Because I misunderstood you. I thought we were just kind of kicking the can over to next year, but that's in essence, in fact, a savings, not a deferral of.
Correct.
For accounting purposes. Okay. Have you, I guess more to this executive director, I know that we have a lean budget as it is, and any particular areas that you all believe that may be additional savings that you are maybe hampered from a policy perspective, right? We may have some policies in place that hamper you from doing other things. Any suggestions that would require us to consider modifying existing policies, the cashback dividend being one of them, but any thoughts of that?
Aside from the cash rewards, we looked at all of our expenses, and like I said last month, that we wouldn't sacrifice anything that was life safety. So we took those off the table. What we put on the table here is where we know that we can save monies. Headquarters, administration, contingency. If there's any other opportunities of soft costs, and that's what I call it, non-safety, non-recurring safety issues, we will always take a look at saving it. But right now, to make that decision, there wasn't. We looked at deferring bridge inspections. That wasn't an area that was conducive like other years. If it would be at the end of the year, mowing cycles or anything of that nature, we looked at. These are the ones that we decided that I can tell you, count on it. These are savings that we're going to have.
Okay. All right. I have no further questions. I don't know if anybody else has any questions of Ms. Schaefer. I know there'll be an item coming up, and I think that may be one of the items that has impact our bottom line, but we'll get into that at the appropriate time and place. Mr. Ferre, before I move on from this item, any questions you have? Okay. All right. Then I guess at this point, we need a motion.
Move.
First from Chairman Martinez, a second from Mr. Vasquez. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. Then we'll move on to item C. And this is, I guess Juan's going to be taking lead on this, and this is a 5-year work program. Mr. Toledo? Or
Item C, MDX fiscal year 2018 to 2022 5-year work program. Transportation improvement, capital improvement, and renewal and replacement programs. $631,700,000 for the 5 years and $1.3 billion total project cost. Endorsement to board.
Mr. Toledo, please.
Good morning. During the month of November, staff met with almost, if not all, the board members of the two committees, Budget and Finance and Operations Committee, to go over, present the 5-year work program, all the new projects, the finance plan, how it was put together. And then during the meeting of November 30th of the joint meeting of Budget and Finance and Operations, we gave the presentation in full, again highlighting all the new projects, looking at the finance plan, how we put everything together, how everything meets all of the debt management policies and toll policies. Since the November 30th meeting, we've only had 2 changes to what was presented. With Project 92404, the 924 West Extension, we included the construction of 107th Avenue from Northwest 138th Street to 170th Street. This is in a conjunction with Miami-Dade County. It's an additional $14 million. We're working on an interlocal agreement with the county where the county will fund 100% of the costs associated with the development and the construction of 107th Avenue. What that does is that it really makes that corridor, that network of streets a lot better, providing better travel times, better connectivity, not only with our project but with all the future development proposed in that area. Also with Project 447, which is the statewide centralized customer service system, that project costs increased by $4.5 million, and that was primarily due to the Central Florida Expressway Authority not participating as one of the partners of the CCSS. So we've had to revise our projections for the next 2 years, and all that is accounted for in the 5-year work program. So in front of you is the 2018-2022 5-year work program, $631.7 million, $1.3 billion in total project cost. Our request is for endorsement to the board.
Mr. Chairman, if I can expand a little bit on the CCSS, the Customer Service Center. The original agreements that and the estimates that were done would include Florida's Turnpike Enterprise, Tampa, Hillsborough, Miami-Dade, and Central Florida Expressway Authority. The issue here is the capital cost of what the system and how we were going to disperse the money. By CFX not participating, being a participating agency, then the remaining capital cost has been split between Florida's Turnpike Enterprise, Miami-Dade, and THEA, and Tampa, Hillsborough, using the formula that we did. So that increases our share. Having said that, the agreements that we're working out for processing of transactions will include a transaction fee to all non-participating agencies. That transaction fee will then be distributed amongst the 3 participating agencies. So we see that in the long term.
But I don't
actually
understand that.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, are you saying that that Central Florida Expressway Authority is going to be billed?
Absolutely.
And they have to pay,
They
you're
will
talking about
pay
the
a
operating
transaction.
expense?
Yes, they will pay to process.
Even though they're not using the system?
Well, it will be no different than an interoperability agreement right now. Their customers would go through a Turnpike or Miami-Dade or Tampa Hillsborough system, and they have their e-pass. They would send the transactions, and then we would charge them a transaction fee to process that.
Okay.
And conversely, when a SunPass customer goes through their system,
I got it.
they would be exchanging.
So the $4 million is just a capital expenditure?
Pretty much,
so
it's
not a
primarily on the
recurring,
capital side.
And then the recurring aspect, they're going to pay a certain amount of their fair share. Got it.
Okay. Any board members have any questions? Mr. Toledo's item, or this item in particular, the work program? Yep. Mr. Walters?
You know, I came by yesterday to pick up a copy of the agenda so I could look at it last night and, you know, be better informed than I feel I am right now. But these couple of these reports, I can't read them. The print is so tiny. Isn't there something we can do?
Print them on bigger sheets.
I mean,
Sheets of paper.
am I the only one having that problem?
Are there, I can't say that I disagree with you. They are visually challenging. Do you not feel comfortable, obviously, supporting something you can't see? Is that in essence, or do you feel? I'm saying
You got to fix your glasses, Cliff.
no. Well, I mean, I just more to me, it's more of an issue as if it's a legitimate concern that you have, then we need to make sure that you're comfortable with what's in here to support that, or have staff follow up with you specifically to go over the items and reserve the right.
Yeah, maybe between now and next week.
And next
that's what I
board,
should
if
do.
you have an option to say, you know what, I can now see it, and I've met with staff. I just want to make sure you feel comfortable, Cliff, to make sure that if you can't see it, I don't know if anybody else is having a problem.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think it's readable. The problem is that it's so small that it really is taxing on your sight.
Yeah.
So I think Cliff's got a very valid point. And in other words, if you printed this on legal-size paper, I think then it would be more readable. And that way you don't have to put any more pages.
Yeah.
I print them on A3 format.
Well, I guess it's more a message to staff to please get with Mr. Walters and make sure that any question that he may have to be able to print that, and obviously any other board members that have challenges. I'm sure Mr. Myers, at his young age, doesn't have the same challenges.
Yeah, but Mr. Chairman, I think if you print it on legal-size paper for all of us, it would just makes it easier reading.
So I guess if we can get that done in preparation and disseminate it to board members, I think that would satisfy, I guess, some of the questions. And, all right, any other comments or questions from our board? All right, then I guess at this point, I entertain a motion to approve the 5-year work program. To endorse it to the board, I guess, to approve it to then endorse it, right? Okay.
This is Financial Committee? Yeah, it doesn't make
This is operations and finance.
So I can make the motion.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Okay. I guess we have a motion by Mr. Ferre. Chairman Martinez seconded.
That's fine.
Okay.
I'll second.
All in favor of approving the 5-year, endorsing the 5-year work program? Okay. Not hearing any opposition?
Aye.
Okay. Supported and voted out. Moving right along to item D.
Item D, MDX procurement contract number ITB 17-03. Capacity extension of the NetApp Enterprise Storage Solution, $400,000. Endorsement to select the lowest responsive and responsible bidder.
Okay. This will be handled by Mr. Toledo as well, I believe. No?
By me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Mr. Rodriguez?
Board members, Helen Cordero's not here. This is typically would be handled by our procurement manager, but she's on the phone if we need any clarifications. But this is an approval of a contract award to the sole responsive and responsible bidder, Data Link Corporation of Minnesota, in the amount of $400,000. Without getting into the details of reading it out, we put out a bid package back in January of 2017 to authorized contractors that do this. And we got one response. Whenever we get one response, we're worried that we did something wrong, that it wasn't clear, that we could change something to get more participation from authorized dealers. Staff looked at everybody that was invited, spoke to everybody that was invited, and the results are on the report, on the agenda item report. Bottom line is there was nothing really that we could do different that would have engaged more bidders on this. With that said, our engineer's estimate was $420,000. The sole responsive and responsible bidder was at $400,000. This is hardware that's going to store all of our data, the databases for the transactions that are toll transactions. I know there's been conversations, and I had the same conversations with staff about potentially moving that to the cloud in the future.
To the cloud?
To the cloud in the future, and we are looking at that. From this particular standpoint, in this particular situation, we did the analysis, and the increase in bandwidth that we would need and the performance measures that we're measured against, this made more sense to go with this net app process. Ivan Del Campo's here, and he can speak to it, and I asked my data guys to be here. But it's our recommendation to award this to the sole responsive and responsible bidder.
Okay. Questions of the board? Mr. Board?
So I understand that it's not that the feasibility study yielded that this was a better solution, but that the contract that we have with the vendor requires us to host the hardware. That's very different from what you just said. You've explained it that it made sense for us to host the data. It really doesn't make any. It really doesn't matter if it makes sense. We're obligated by contract to do that. That's the justification. Do we agree on that? So then it becomes a little bit meaningless whether it's 420 or 400,000. We have to do it because we're obligated. I think that it would be important for staff to incorporate in new contracts or new renewals the ability to use what Netflix and Spotify and all those large players use. They don't host their data because it just doesn't. We can't compete with our 20 servers versus a server farm that hosts 500,000 of them.
Right.
So we should direct staff so that any of the new contracts that we have, when we go to an RFP, allow us to choose to delegate the hosting of the data offsite.
Makes a lot of sense.
It does.
Yes. That's the conversation that we had. Yes, you're right.
So we're obligated to purchase this, basically.
I have a question, but any other board members have any questions? Okay. All right. I guess my question is, from a time sensitivity, are we under some type of a timeline pressure to do this now, today, next month? What are the consequences of just moving forward to the suggestion of throwing this RFP out and going directly?
Can't do it.
You can't do it.
Yeah.
We're under contract already. This will be for a new renewal or a new contract. Okay. But that's a great inquiry.
Yeah. I get nervous when there's only one provider. As someone who does a lot of procurement, I always feel very uncomfortable with one provider, regardless of what it is. And I understand I have great respect for our procurement department, and I know that they've done their due diligence, and I know we have a very involved and engaged board that would ask these questions. So that gives me some comfort, but I can tell you I have nervousness about just to one vendor, and I understand we have we're in a hole. So I guess that really negates any other decision making on our part, and just other than to approve and award this item. So with that said, get a motion to approve this procurement. I have one from Mr. Vasquez and second from Secretary Wolf. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Aye.
Item passes. All right. Item.
Treasurer, just on the motion, how do we address the issue that for the new RFPs that we should reserve?
I took it as
You've
part of
you've
your
captured
approval.
that. Very
That's why I
good.
wrote it down.
Thank you,
Mr. Board, I think, you've given us some direction. Staff has heard you. I think it's also a little bit incumbent on you to make sure that in their priorities that, put a tickler on to remind yourself down the road, because I know we have a lot of moving parts, and I think that's an excellent idea. That makes a lot of sense, and obviously your knowledge of that is very much appreciated. All right. Item E, and this would be Mr. Toledo, Mr. Attorney.
Yeah, item E, MDX interlocal agreement between Miami-Dade County and Miami-Dade Expressway Authority for the construction of the Dolphin Station Park and Ride lot at the Homestead extension of the Florida Turnpike and Northwest 12th Street, $8,218,816.26. That's Miami-Dade County's contribution. $660,000 is MDX's contribution. Endorsement of the First Amendment to interlocal agreement between Miami-Dade County and MDX for the construction of the Dolphin Station Park and Ride lot project.
Okay, Mr. Toledo.
Yeah, the interlocal agreement with the county for the Dolphin Station Park and Ride calls for lays out the funding parameters for the park and ride. The First Amendment increases the county's funding participation from $5 million to $13.216 million, which is the $8 million increase, and that's really to be in line with the bids and the contracts that were negotiated for the construction and oversight of the project. One other thing to clarify: when we first did the amendment last year, we had stated that MDX is, as a partner, is contributing the administrative cost of the project. So the agreement also does clean that up. And just for the purposes of putting it out there, the administrative costs that we're estimating currently for the project are about $666,000, and that's the MDX cost for our oversight of the contracts and the management that typically are overseen by the GC. So all that and those costs are in the work program that was just approved. But this ILA is for really what it calls for is the additional funding increase as a result of the bids and the contracts.
Okay. Any board members have any questions on this item? Mr. Walters.
One, who will be responsible for any cost overruns if that happens?
Wow.
The agreement calls out for anything that comes up in the project. We would notify them immediately, and they would decide whether or not they want to take on the additional costs as it relates to the construction and the oversight of that project. But barring any unforeseens, which right now we haven't really dealt with that matter, but any additional costs would be would be the responsibility of the county, and they would need to agree to them.
They would. Well, you said that they would need to agree to it.
Before we would proceed with any additional work beyond the scope that's already approved, the county would need to approve those additional change orders.
So if we're 90% down the road and we identify additional cost, before we do the additional 10%, they would have to approve that at that point in time, not before we start the contract.
That's correct.
Correct.
Okay. What happens if they say no?
We don't do the work.
And then who does that reflect poorly on? Is it us? Is it the county? Is it a joint venture? I understand it's a joint venture, but
we would treat that as additional work that's not necessary for the project, and we wouldn't get done. I mean, if something comes up during the course of the project that needs to be addressed, we're confident that the county will be, we are reporting everything to the county. They have inspectors there. They see the day-to-day. So, right now what's included in the scope is everything that they have addressed with us prior to putting these contracts out to bid, and we plan to build what's in the scope.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, just to finish the thought, Mr. Ferre, I have great respect for you and the staff. I really genuinely do. You guys are very professional, very knowledgeable what you do. If this was a private sector deal and I was going into a contract I would not put myself in that position, simply because it's a variable that I can't control. So I guess part of my concern, if this was a different way, I'd be like, let's get it in writing today. Any cost overruns, you will be responsible for it. Not let's get to 90%, and at that point in time, let's see if we agree to that. And I say that particularly in light of the political, social, economic environment that we're dealing in at the county. In other words, if the fact is that the perception is that this organization is flush with money, there's a good likelihood, and again, this is not to address at Mr. Toledo or Mr. Rodriguez or anybody in particular, it's a general opinion and comment. I believe that we're putting ourselves at risk by not tying that up going into this contract. So if from a general counsel's perspective or the agreement, I'm sure you have great answers. But it makes me feel uncomfortable. Maybe it's my lack of understanding. So please tell me if you feel differently, and then Mr. Ferrer will have his comments.
This is a design build project, so what's there right now is a lump sum fee that's been negotiated and agreed to. The current agreement, the way it stands right now, does delineate that the county is responsible for any changes that would come up during the course of the project. However, they do have the right to approve those changes, but it does say that they would be responsible for those change orders if they were to come up.
Okay. Mr. Ferrer.
Mr. Chairman, we do this also with District 6, where we contract with them and we pay them to do work for us. And so my question, one, is this any different from the contracts that we do with the state or that we've done with the county before? Because we've done this with the county on several occasions, right?
When we contribute funds to state projects, and we would be responsible for change orders on our end, but we would have the right to.
And we've done this,
or not.
and we've done this for amounts that are larger than this, and contracts that are larger than this.
Yes, that is correct.
Right.
And thank you for making that point. I believe that those deals applied under those conditions and the times of that things were. I think we're just in a new environment with the relationships between our legislature and the county, and that's why I say that. But whatever, I get it, it's procedural. So I thank you for clarifying, Mr. Toledo, Mr. Ferrer, for adding to that. Juan, another question for you. The $666,000, is that what we had publicly put out there? And I mean, I'm doing this from memory. Have we publicly stated in previous meetings when this item came up that we would be incurring the GEC contract?
We did make that statement when the agreement was first approved. I believe it was back in May or June of 2016. I believe the estimate we gave at that time was in the $500,000 range. Now with the project now in place and seeing the level of effort that's going to take on all sides, the estimates right now have been updated. So it is an estimate. We're going to try to be as efficient as possible. The county is also participating in inspections, so we're going to take advantage of that. But our current estimate right now is about $666,000 for our fees or the cost that MDX would incur as part of their oversight.
Okay, Mr. Board.
So, Mr. Treasurer, I think the question that you left unasked was, in previous projects, have we been stuck with a bill? Number one. And number two, has the county ever not paid when they have committed to reimburse us?
No. Today, the county has honored any agreements that we've had with them.
So going back to the expense that we're trying to approve today, the $666,000, that's about a 20-something% increase over what originally we said, right? That we said 500. So it's 25%, doing the math in my brain. So any anticipated costs, any additional costs that you believe may be that we didn't, don't foresee, or is that our final?
That takes into consideration the cost that we would incur. And again, it's an estimate at this point.
Again, I ask those questions because in light of the previous conversation about our finances, $150,000 more, $166,000 more is a significant dollar amount in addition to what we're doing. So, but I understand this is a great project. I think the project itself is has a lot of merit, but nonetheless, I think we need to have this public conversation. Mr. Frey?
Mr. Chairman, I think it's very important to put on the record, and that this greatly helps MDX. In other words, this is a project that is being done by the county, but they, in effect, are really improving the viability of our system on that segment. And if it works, and if it works well, I think we're also helping decongest the traffic in this county, and we're also advancing the cause of a more efficient system for the transit system.
And I agree with you, Mr. Ferrer. I think this does help MDX tremendously in this community. It's a very meritorious project. I think it's a great project for this community, and I think it'll be an example of what else we'll be doing down the road.
Helps MDX.
Yes. Okay. Then with that said, let me entertain a motion to approve the interlocal agreement between Miami-Dade County and MDX for the construction of a Dolphin Station Park and Ride. I hear a motion.
I'll move it.
Chairman Martinez moves it. Seconded by Mr. Vasquez. All in favor, signify by say aye.
All right.
Okay. All opposed? Okay. Item passes unanimously. We're moving on to item F.
Item F, MDX procurement contract number MDX 14-03, Synergy Automated Manual Review System, Image Review System, endorsement of assignment and assumption agreement to Open Roads Consultant Incorporated.
Okay.
Since Helen's in, I'll handle this one. Do you want me before? Okay. September 2013, MDX entered into a contract with Q-Free America, Inc. to provide software system for the automated and manual review of toll images, as well as the labor force manual review. In 2016, MDX extended the contract for 2 additional years and removing the manual review labor from the scope of the contract. Q-Free America has requested to assign the contract to its wholly owned subsidiary, Open Roads Consultant, Inc. Staff has performed the customary due diligence to determine ORC's responsibility, including verified corporate status, and that no performance compliance issues exist. There are no adverse findings relating to ORC. All terms and conditions of the contract will remain in full force and effect, including the fees. The contract will expire on August 31st, 2018, and not to exceed the contract amount for the ongoing 2-year term, which is $1,957,661.04.
Any questions of our general counsel on this item?
Why? Why are they asking us to assign the contract?
Because they're moving all that type of work into that subsidiary.
So are the financial statements for the subsidiary equal to the parent? I mean, if we were to proceed with a claim against them, how would we?
Well, part of the assignment, we did not take Q-Free off the hook. They're still responsible.
Okay.
Any other questions of? Okay. With that said, then I entertain a motion to have this item F approve the procurement contract number MDX 1403 with Synergy Automated. Motion by Mr. Board. Seconded by Mr. Myers. Okay. All in favor, signify by saying aye. All opposed, like sign. Okay. Item approved. All right. I think that concludes the action items. I guess at this point, Mr. Rodriguez, these are informational items.
Yes, a couple of the informational items. I take the comment that Mr. Walters stated to apply to all reports in the documents, that we will print them in bigger papers. But a couple of announcements. The first one is, many of you already know, and Secretary Wolf may want to expand, but State Secretary Jim Boxall has resigned effective, I believe it's February 3rd.
February 3rd.
An interim has been named, Rachel Cohn. She's the Assistant Secretary for Finance and Administration. We look forward to continuing our relationship with the department as customary. The second announcement is yesterday we did have the groundbreaking, the official or unofficial, because we already started construction at the Dolphin Park and Ride. It was very well attended, and if you want to expand, Mr. Chairman, a lot of the commentary was the partnerships between the county, the state, and the authority, the local agency. In that particular example, we are an agent to both the state and the county in getting a project done on time and in a particular time frame. We're very cognizant all the time of the various contractual elements of any agreement. No one ever wants to be left hanging, holding the bag. But because of our experience with both the county and the state, we're confident that the type of contracting we do allows us, and I guess the comments that Mr. Toledo said is the terms of the agreement basically say that as an owner, Miami-Dade County has the right to agree to any changes, that we as an agent can't unilaterally decide to make a change on the field. I think that's really what this comes down to. We've worked with this many different times and we're confident with it, but yesterday was a really good testament of the value that we have in the community in getting jobs done.
And I understand that Mr. Chairman of MDX, that they were so recognized by both the mayor and the others that were there.
Yeah, I was at yesterday's event, and I agree with everything that was said. I thought you heard glowing support of MDX from both the mayor, from Commissioner...
And this time it was public, not private.
Commissioner Pepe Diaz and others in reference to the fact that we are a good partner. We do work hard. And I think it is incumbent of us to make sure that message gets out there, because there is a perception and then there's a reality.
Right.
And the perception is not the reality when it comes to MDX. And yesterday was a great example of that. This is something that is going to help public transportation, this park and ride. It's going to be have 850 parking spaces for people to park their vehicles there, and a year from now be able to take express buses from that location in West Dade down our 836 to 17th Street to avoid and try to. It's not going to minimize. It's not going to alleviate traffic, but it's a first step in trying to find other ways to alleviate some of our traffic issues. I thought it was really well done. I thought it was fantastic. There were no negative support at all. We had local leaders such as Mayor J.C. Bermudez from Doral also present, so it wasn't just state and county, it was also local. And everybody was on the same page about working together. The key is for us and for our elected officials to not make that just at a groundbreaking ceremony.
Yeah.
It needs to be throughout. Criticize us when we're entitled to be criticized, because that's what they're here to do, but criticize us for things that are actually correct, not simply to criticize us. And we're going to be working on that. It's been an uphill battle, and certainly during my tenure and during Mr. Mayor Ferray's and others, but we're going to keep going. The fact is, we have the facts on our side. We have a lot to be proud of on this board. We've done a lot of wonderful things that you can show your kids and your grandchildren. I was part of that. So let's move forward. And it was an honor to be there with the Turnpike, DOT. They've always been great partners, and I'm looking forward to continuously working with them as well. Thank you, Mr. Treasurer.
Okay. Mr. Vasquez and then Mr. Ferray.
To the director, I know that earlier this month we asked staff to prepare an item to bring us the possibility of bifurcating the marketing/public relations contract, and I'd like to know a little bit about the status of that and what our expected timing for that is.
Mr. Vasquez, we're moving forward as if that was the directive to split the agreement. We're going to schedule an intergovernmental meeting the first weeks of February so that you can authorize us to release the procurement documents.
Very good. Thank you.
I took that as a directive.
Mr. Chairman, as an expansion of our director's statement about the governor, last night and this morning, has requested the Florida Transportation Commission. This is not an official request, but verbally to our chair, that we conclude the nominating process as quickly as possible, and he would like it done in a month. Now, I don't think it can be done in a month, and the chair has already explained that procedurally we have to advertise and so on. But I think it's important for us to understand, since MDX is under attack by one or more members of the Dade delegation in Tallahassee in the session that begins in March. I think it's clear that with all due respects to Rachel, who is a wonderful person and a good government employee, that the governor wants a permanent Secretary of Transportation by the time the session is in swing. So I think it's a clear indication of the concern at the top for the leadership of the department, and that affects us.
Absolutely. Okay. Any more comments, Secretary Wolf?
I personally am going to miss Secretary Boxholt. He's a great person to work with.
Me too.
Very quick study. Really cares about people. He's fair. He dealt well with many issues. And this is a time when we have a lot of things going on in Miami-Dade, some tricky issues that the department needs to develop a position and work with our partners. And he'll be missed in that regard. I would fully expect that Secretary Cohn, for whatever time that she is in place, and it has been a recent tradition to make quick appointments, so I don't think it'll be long. I would expect that her first desire will be to continue Secretary Boxholt's policies. FDOT is not personality-driven. We prefer continuity of opinion, and I suspect on all sensitive issues, her first question is going to be, where are we on this? What commitments did the Secretary Boxholt make? And but given that, new decisions that he had not made that are on the table, it may be difficult to reach them in an interim period, because I would also expect that someone that's there temporarily will not make dramatic new decisions. So I do look forward to a permanent appointment. But Secretary Cohn is also a person that's very easy to deal with, very fair, and there are some issues that just aren't going to wait for a new appointment, and we'll need to move forward. So I would project to you that there's going to be continuity of opinion from FDOT, and business will not stop.
Okay. Thank you for
Mr. Chairman,
that.
I think it would be appropriate, and I would like to make a motion, if you would permit it, of commendation to and thanks from MDX for the wonderful relation that we've had and the leadership that Secretary Boxholt has given to the department.
I think it's a great suggestion to recognize him for his efforts, obviously, and we've enjoyed a great relationship with him. And
it would have to go to the full board,
right.
obviously.
What, if I may, Mr. Ferrer, what I recommend, Mr. Ferrer, is that you bring up that same resolution on Tuesday, so that the whole board can.
Well, I'm saying that this committee should refer it, and therefore it would be on the.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah, it would be on the
procedurally,
record.
do we need anything to do, Mr. Director, or is that just a direction? How do we
I will
memorialize this?
I will draft a resolution for the board's consideration at the board meeting on
Thank you.
Tuesday, and then we can just forward it to Secretary Boxholt.
Perfect. Okay. Any other comments or questions from our board? Staff, anybody for the good of the order? Okay. I think that concludes our meeting for today. Next week, on the 31st, we'll be having our regularly scheduled board meeting. So with that said, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Move to adjourn. We stand adjourned. Thank you, everyone.